Hey everybody, as I shoot this video right now, I'm faced with having to possibly evacuate today. You're watching this video at least a couple weeks later, but currently there are 4 major fires burning in the Los Angeles area with some smaller ones as well. The green room is located right in the center, surrounded by all the fires. Now, my neighborhood doesn't currently have an evacuation notice, but that could change at any moment. I'm going to have Future Bob jump in and give you an update at the end of this video, but let's talk about what my current evacuation plans are, and then we'll discuss some protocols for other emergency situations. This is a big topic, and a lot of your response in a given emergency is going to have to do with what the emergency is, how many animals you have, and what your animals are. So we're going to talk about snakes in particular in this video, but even if we're just generally saying snakes, there are certain species that require different things. So it's really important to know your animals and know what they immediately require, and then understand just what could potentially crop up in your corner of the world. So let's talk about my specific situation that I'm dealing with right now, and then we'll get into some others. In the unlikely event that you find yourself surrounded by raging fires, here's what you do. And actually, you don't have to be surrounded by raging fires. Just let's say you have to evacuate for some reason. Here's how I'm doing it. I'm monitoring the situation closely right now, and I'll be ready to start packing up snakes if the borders of the evacuation area get close to the green room. So I'm not even waiting for a mandatory evacuation. I'll wait for a suggestion of an evacuation, and then I'll start packing because it's going to take me a little bit of time. And I've already packed up my personal things that I know I'm going to take. I have those in a pile ready to go, so that won't take me extra time. So for my snakes, I have many snake bags ready and pillowcases, and I have a lot of tubs. And I know where these items are in my house, so I don't have to go searching for them if I need to evacuate. So the idea is to just get my snakes in their own individual bags and then get them in tubs. So this particular tub, depending on which snakes I put in here, this could hold, 8 or 10 snakes. So you want to have enough tubs or boxes or whatever to hold all your snakes. You guys, there is construction happening outside right now, and I don't have time to shoot this video after they stop working. So we're just going to have banging in this video, I think. My guess is you can hear it. Maybe you can't. I don't know. But anyway, apologies if it's annoying. So there are shelters set up all over Los Angeles right now, and there are even small animal shelters set up all over. But I have some other options. I've got friends in almost all directions that are well out of the affected area, and I could potentially also find a hotel room. They're probably all booked up right now, but I've got some options, and that's probably what I would do rather than going to a shelter. But either way, whatever I find, my snakes are going to be fine. They're fine for a couple days in a snake bag. They're fine for a couple days in a tub. This is like if you were to ship them, and they're fine without their optimum heat and humidity for a couple days, as long as I have them in a temperature-controlled car and a temperature-controlled house or hotel or something like that. I think a lot of people believe that if their snake doesn't have access to their heat source for any period of time, they're going to start to die. And that's just not the case. They're more hardy than a lot of people think. Now, if your snake just ate and they're digesting food, it would probably be good to bring a heat mat, disconnect it from your cage or whatever, or maybe you have an extra one, heat mat and a thermostat that you could bring along so that they could get some heat. Or maybe some other options that we're going to talk about in a minute. But in my case, my snakes are all digested, and I've made the decision to not feed anybody since the evacuations or the fires started happening and there was a potential for an evacuation. I decided I wasn't going to feed anyone until we're clear with these evacuations. So none of my snakes right now are currently digesting, which is great. Yesterday, I spoke with my friend Cara, who is a member of the Horde of Keepers over on Green Room Python's Patreon. In fact, you know what? Let's scroll the Patreon supporters while we talk about Cara's evac situation. Cara had to evacuate her home yesterday with her snakes. She has a small handful of snakes, And I spoke with her a little bit about what they might need. And she has a Brazilian rainbow boa that's fairly young, I think. And Brazilian rainbow boas, especially when they're young, are more fragile than most snakes, and humidity is a really important factor for them. So I had originally suggested that maybe she wet the bag, but then she made a good point that she was afraid that it might get too cold if she had a wet, the snake just sitting in a wet bag. So I recommended that she just let the snake swim in the bathtub. She was in a hotel. And, I said, just let the snakes swim in a lukewarm bathtub a couple times a day, and that'll give him his hydration. The good news, though, is that Cara got an all clear this afternoon from the county saying that the evacuation order has been lifted and she can go back to her home. So Cara's home is safe, she's safe, and her snakes are safe. I think she was only evacuated for about 24 hours, which is great. So thanks so much to Cara and the rest of the Horde of Keepers for supporting Green Room Pythons over on Patreon. And special thanks to our channel sponsors, Black Box Cages, Lane Labs, the Royals Project, and Rare Genetics RGI. If you don't know who any of those companies are, give them a quick Google search, and I think that you'll find that they're delightful companies to deal with. So Cara's evacuation was kind of a best case scenario, where you get evacuated for a day or two while emergency services go in and make sure there's no fire, put the fire out, whatever, and you get called back into your home and everything's safe. But let's say it was a worst case scenario where I get evacuated and a fire rips through and destroys everything, which is unfortunately what's happened to thousands of people here in the Los Angeles area. If that were to happen, here's what I would do. My personal plan would be to pile the snakes back into the car from the hotel or my friend's house, wherever I was staying, and I would head north to Seattle because I have family that live in Seattle, and that's where I could go for an extended period. It takes me about a day and a half to get there. The snakes will be fine in the car during that time. And when I got there, I would get them in separate tubs. I would get them temporarily on heat tape. I'd probably grab a bunch of heat tape and get the tubs lined up on that. I would also try to look around to see if there were any facilities that could temporarily house them. Like, is there any facilities with some empty racks that I could bring them to, something like that? That's a tough situation to be in, but it could potentially be done. But just knowing that I have a place myself where I could house them if I needed to is good. It's more difficult when you have 30 plus snakes or many, many more snakes. It's easier for a lot of you who only have one or two snakes, something like that. By the way, if you do only have a few snakes, you could box them up in a cardboard box as though you're shipping them, packing tape, stuff like that. That might be easier than, you don't need a bunch of bins that hold 10 snakes at once. Let's talk about some other common emergencies. The most common being a power outage, right? That's what we usually talk about when we're discussing emergencies with reptiles. Now, let me ask you this. If you had a choice to have a power outage in the middle of winter or in the dead heat of summer, which one would you choose that you would rather have the outage? Did you say winter? Well done. But there were other people watching this video, not you, but other people who chose summertime. And it's important to know that heat can kill a snake much faster than the cold. Now, it's got to be really hot in the winter for it to kill a snake, so I mean in the summer to kill a snake. So we're talking not 80 and 90 degree summer, we're talking well over 100. But still, cold is okay for quite a while. Heat is not. Excessive heat is not. Depending on the species, you could quickly start to see problems with your animals with excessive heat. Now, regardless of hot or cold, whatever, what's the best way to handle a power outage? Have a generator. And I'm not talking about like one of those battery things that you can charge your stuff with. I'm talking about a big, fat, noisy, gas-powered generator. Hey guys, not quite future Bob, but later that same day, Bob. I'm just looking at the footage that I shot, and I was kind of just winging it. And I wasn't really thinking about people with only one or two snakes or maybe three. You can use one of those batteries to power your cages if you only have a couple snakes. I was thinking about people like me with 30 snakes. You need a generator. But you're going to need to make sure that battery is charged, at the time that you need to use it. And then you need to have a way to recharge it if needed, hopefully with your car or something like that. So those could potentially work. But let's go back and talk about this generator. They're not cheap, but if you live in a rural area or you live in an area where it's common to experience long-term power outages, it's worth the money. Make sure you've got a full gas can as well with it. But let's say you live in, I don't know, the North Hollywood or Burbank area where power rarely goes out, and when it does, there are services right here to get it restored immediately, so it's almost never out for very long, so you don't have a generator. That's my situation, by the way. If I found myself in the unlikely scenario that I was out of power for a long period of time in the wintertime, I would grab a bunch of water bottles and fill them up with warm water and put them in the snakes' cages. Now, hopefully you still have a way to heat your water. My tap would work, for one thing, but also I've got gas stove. But, you know, as long as you can put warm water bottles in your cages, your snakes can curl up on those. The other thing you can have on hand are these. Hang on, I'll get one. The other thing you could do is have these Uniheat reptile-specific warmers on hand. These aren't hand warmers. Those are dangerous. Don't use hand warmers. Uniheat, you can get these from pretty much any reptile shipping company. You just open up the thing and the oxygen hitting the little heat pack will start to warm it up. That one happened to be a 40-hour, but you want the 72. Get the 72-hour ones. And then, you know, you can stick it to the top of you know, tub or box or whatever, and then just have like crumpled paper or something as a buffer between the snake and the pack. Stella, will you stay here for a minute? So with those, you know, it's probably better to put your snake in a, you know, if you're staying home, you just have a power outage, put your snake in a box or something with it if they're digesting and need it. Because that's not something that you want your snake cuddled up with because it could get too hot. Whereas a bottle of warm water, you could make sure that bottle is at like 90 to 95 degrees, something like that. It'll slowly cool down. Whereas this will remain hot for a while. And you want some sort of buffer like crumpled paper or something like that in between the heat pack and the snake. But those are good to have on hand. In a hot summer situation, I would make sure there was airflow in the house, open doors, windows, whatever. And then give my snakes a big bowl of water that they could either wrap around or crawl into if they needed to cool down. A better solution would be a big old noisy generator hooked up to an AC unit or a swamp cooler. But just remember that your snakes are going to be okay with suboptimal parameters for a short period of time. For instance, if I lost power right now for a couple days in January in the middle of Los Angeles, things would be okay. It would get down to a chilly 69 or 70 degrees at night. That'd be probably the lowest it would get to, and then it would warm up during the day. Not an optimal situation, but the snakes are going to be okay. Now, if I lived in Minnesota, things would be different, and I would take some measures, you know. But they're going to be okay for a little while. Just imagine snakes in the wild where all of a sudden a unseasonably cool weather pattern comes through and the clouds blot out the sun and it rains for 48 hours. Not a comfortable situation for reptiles in the area, but they're going to be okay. Now, there could always be a situation where your snake has a dormant bug or they're successfully fighting an RI that they haven't really had any symptoms of, and then you get them into some suboptimal conditions like that, and it kickstarts things, and all of a sudden you start to see symptoms. So hopefully your snakes are all healthy during this emergency, but that kind of thing could happen. So, you know, I say that it's okay to have your snakes in suboptimal conditions for a few days, but that's assuming they're healthy. So an emergency situation is not always convenient, but hopefully you've got healthy animals. Stella, can you come back over here, please? You're done with being on camera? Okay, see you later. That's another thing. As soon as I'm done shooting this, I'm putting Stella back in her cage because I want to make sure that I know where all my snakes are, just in case we have to evacuate quickly. I don't want to be looking for a snake. But know your animals, know the species, because not everyone is the same. You know, if you have a baby rainbow boa and you're evacuating, make sure that the container that they're in is quite humid, stuff like that. Know the emergencies and be ready for the emergencies that could happen in your area. In fact, this, can you see this? This is a bomb-proof metal rack, basically, that I have put between, rather than stacking 3 cages up like this, I've put this rack in here because these cages are small enough that in the event of an earthquake, which is very common in Southern California, those 3 cages could topple. These ones wouldn't, but those would. So I made a decision to have this built for me, thanks to my friend Lewis who built this thing. And that'll keep those up for, that's just an emergency situation rack right there. Ooh, that's my alert system that will tell me if I have to evacuate. And it also gives me updates on fires. Okay, that's not an evacuation thing, fortunately. For me, it's an update on one of the fires that's pretty far away from me right now. But that will alert me if I have to evacuate, and then I'll also get an alert from the county on my phone if I have to evacuate. Plus, I can check there's an app where I can check the status of where the fires are and everything. So it's good to have. Have your to-go stuff easy to get to because you may not have a lot of time once you get that evacuation warning. You know, if a fire crops up in my neighborhood that's different from the other fires that are going right now, I could have to leave in minutes, in which case I don't have time to put snakes in bags. I'm just going to take all the bags with me, put all the snakes in tubs really quick, and get out of here. So I have all that stuff ready to go. All right, we're cutting to Future Bob in a moment for an update on this, but just know that this video was thrown together very quickly, and it's probably not nearly as thorough as I usually like to make my videos. I think I hit all the main points that I wanted to hit, but help me out and put your ideas of, oh, there's another thing, hang on. Okay, that was another update on a fire that's pretty far from me. Great. Anyway, what I was saying is put your ideas of evacuation scenarios or just emergency preparedness stuff in the comments below, because that'll help people out. They can read the comments and get some good ideas from you guys as well. All right, here's Future Bob with an update. As you can see, I'm safe. My snakes are safe. Even my fancy hats from the future are safe. At this point, there are still fires burning. There are more cropping up right now, and I'm still in a sort of, I think it's called a red warning zone for fire hazard. But there's no fires that are near me or evacuation areas currently near me. So I've fed all my snakes a couple days after I shot that video. I felt comfortable enough to feed snakes. So everything is normal as far as they're concerned. As I said before, though, there are people all over that have literally lost everything of all income levels, high, medium, low income people that have lost everything. So if you're interested in helping out and would like to donate, here are some organizations that you could look into donating to. So that's where we're at. Thanks for watching. See you next week.